Welcome. Thank you so much, Jedd, for joining us.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for having me. Appreciate it.
So, Jedd, I actually came across your name, and I think you had the moniker Napalm already, but I'm not sure. It was probably in 2002 on the Gripsport.
Yeah, that's probably about right. That lines up. I think I first found out about grip in 2002, and at that time there were not very many forums that were online or that would address Gripsport, but the main one was Gripboard. So I got on that thing as soon as I possibly could, man.
How did you get into grip? How did you learn about it?
I found out about it through a guy named Rick Walker on the drsquat.com forum. So Fred Hatfield used to have this site called Dr. Squat. He was, I think, if I remember correctly, he was the first guy to ever squat 1,000 pounds. And he had a forum. That was really the first forum that I ever found out about. It's centered mostly around strength and conditioning and quite a bit of powerlifting and Olympic lifting. So I started out, my first foray into strength sports was I got highly interested in Olympic weightlifting. So I practiced that for a while. But in 2003, we decided to do a strongman competition. And it lined up well because with Olympic weightlifting, you have to pick the weight off the floor, put it over your head. And that correlated real well to the strongman movements like log clean and press, axle clean and press, things along those lines. So along that same timeline, I found out about a grip contest that was taking place in Punxsutawney, Pennsylvania. So I'm from Pennsylvania, and Punxsutawney is only about a 2.5-3 hour drive. So I was highly interested in strongman. Grip strength is very important for strongman, so I figured Gripsport and strongman would complement one another. So I signed up for the grip contest as well. And the strongman contest took place in August of 2003, and then the grip contest was in September of 2003. So the training kind of overlapped well, and I was able to train for 2 contests at the same time, and everything complemented each other, and it worked out great.
Actually, I went to undergrad at Carnegie Mellon in Pennsylvania. I'm very fond of Pennsylvania as well. Where are you from in Pennsylvania?
I grew up in Towanda, Pennsylvania. It's in Bradford County. I live in Wyalusing, Pennsylvania now. It's also in Bradford County. So I went to college at Mansfield University. That's in, I believe, Tioga County of Pennsylvania. So I've spent the vast majority of my life here in Pennsylvania, obviously. And I grew up around here. I worked around here. Now I have a gym in Wyalusing. So, I'm kind of a country boy, I guess. I don't get into the cities that much, and that's perfectly fine with me.
I can empathize. So just for the audience to know, Gripboard was maybe my favorite forum that I've ever been to. It was a forum of people that had a very niche interest that wasn't glamorous at all. Nobody was, there were no accolades for in the strength community for the Gripsport, but it was people who were like-minded, very friendly. There was a sense of a brotherhood, a kind of community. And it composed, I noticed a lot. There were a lot of strongmen, but there was also a lot of arm wrestlers and climbers, and then just people who got very into hand strength in general. I think you really specialize in hand strength, and from what I recall, you were quite formidable with block training and maybe the inch dumbbell also.
Yeah, so when I first started, like I said, I signed up for that contest, and one of the events was the 2-hand pinch. And back in the day, all we did was we would take 2 45s, put them together, and then run a pipe through the center. And then you would pinch on the 2 45s, the smooth sides out. So, and then you would add weight on the outside of the plates. So the pipe would run perpendicular to your body between your feet. Then you would pick up the implement, and you had to lift it 6 inches off the ground and then set it back down. Since then, that event it's remained the same as far as like the basic concepts, but there's specialized equipment for it. But anyway, I found that I was very good at pinching right from the beginning. My hands are very, very big, and I have an extraordinarily long thumb.
Your thumb,
so,
yeah.
In the past, it's been called the porn thumb. So that's what I was gifted with, and because I was good at pinching, I found out about block weight training. I bought a blob from Rick Walker. I ended up lifting it the first day that I encountered it, which is very, very rare. It's a blob is a 50-pound. It's half of a 100-pound York dumbbell, and these old style York dumbbells were sloped on both sides. So you have the weight to contend with plus the shape, and it can be very tough for people to lift those. They generally have to train for several months in order to lift a 50-pound blob. I was able to do it the first time I ran into it because I had already been doing a lot of pinching, and my training partner at the time, Jim Smith, we really excelled at thinking, I guess, as they would say, outside the box. So how can we train for something even though we don't have it? We would figure out ways to do that. So I was already doing very high volume of pinching, and not only just for that two-hand pinch event, but also varying widths. So once I encountered the blob, I was already conditioned to that width, and I was able to pick it up. Since then, I've done, I think, 20 pounds added onto it with weight connected with a string over top. I know I have the world record for the farmer's walk as far as, it's never been in competition, so it's not an official world record. But as far as the longest distance ever walked with two blobs, I've done that, and I'm close to like 150 feet. I've lifted some of the biggest block weights that anyone's ever lifted. I've done half a 140-pound Legacy York dumbbell, and is the only person that's ever lifted a block weight that's bigger than that is Brian Shaw.
Wow.
So it's really my forte, the wide pinch, the blobs, block weights, all that stuff.
Which is interesting because there's a book called Mastery of Hand Strength. I forgot the author's name. Maybe you can remind me.
His name is John Brookfield. He has Mastery of Hand Strength and the Grip Master's Manual, among other publications.
Yeah,
those are his two main grip books.
It's a fantastic introduction. And in that book, he asserts that, so maybe we should talk a little bit about the kinds of grip sport, because there's like a kind of crushing grip strength with like grippers.
And I happen to have a gripper right here. So the most basic type of crushing strength is where you would take a gripper and then close it like that. So crushing, it's called crushing because you're moving through the resistance dynamically. And most of grip is isometric, meaning you're putting your hand on something and there's no real movement. You're trying to just maintain that grip and then pick the implement up. So you have crushing. Pinching is when your hand is positioned like this. It could be narrow, it could be wider, it could be dynamic, or it could be isometric, but your thumb is facing against your fingers, and the limiting factor is your thumb strength. So pinching, then you also have supporting, which is where your fingers take the brunt of the load. So something as simple as a normal deadlift or a pull-up or a dumbbell row, all of these things require supporting grip strength. You can, in grip sport, generally the implement is much larger. So the implement has a fat handle, it might rotate, and you've got to try to get as much of your hand around it as possible and then lock your hand isometrically and not let your fingers open up against that resistance. So those are the three main things that are tested in grip sport.
And Brookfield asserted that the pinch style training was the most applicable to general life hand strength needs.
Well, specifically, I know he used the phrase block weights equal hand strength.
Yeah.
So the nice thing about block weights is they are wider. Okay. So there's something to be said about a wide open hand position. Now, what does wide mean? Wide is different for everybody because everybody's hand size is different. But basically the open hand position, meaning you are not able to close your hand around the implement, that's where you're going to get the most recruitment of the most muscle in your hands. And in my opinion, and I believe this echoes what Brookfield was talking about, that kind of training will cross over to many other types of training. So if you're going to do anything at all, it should be like block weights and or thick bar.
So the interesting thing is that there's a sort of principle in hand strength training that the more specific your training is toward what you're trying to do, the better the results will be.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, for example, with powerlifters that want to be able to deadlift without straps, higher weights, and their grip is actually their limiting factor. How can they use knowledge from Gripsport to improve their grip? Isn't it just holding the barbell at the exact diameter that they're supposed to use? Isn't that the best training?
Yes, absolutely. I totally believe that most people who need help with their deadlift really only need to work on their deadlift grip. Unfortunately, there's a lot of marketing around handles that you can put onto like a barbell or a chin-up bar or dumbbell rows, and they claim that they will make your hands much stronger, your arms stronger, et cetera, and that is the case. However, your hands, because of all the joints in the hands and fingers, you end up with a situation where you must train very, very specifically to your goal, or else if you get too far away, then you'll lose that specificity and you'll be training for something else. So it's a bad mistake due to lack of awareness and marketing, probably, that people try to strengthen their hands for the deadlift or even farmer's handle, farmer's holds, farmer's carries. They train it by going to a thick bar implement, and then when they go back to training the bar, they realize they really haven't gained that much. So in that case, you don't want to get too far away from like the sport-specific positioning of your hands, because if you do, the results will dwindle very, very quickly.
Is there a give and take between some of the, like for example, with the pinch, your thumb pad would get bigger, which I assume would help with the crushing strength, positioning a gripper, but it may make it harder to hold thick bars. Is that so?
Yeah, especially a smaller-handed individual. I'll go back to in my early days of getting into the strength conditioning field, spent some time with Jimmy Wendler. Do you know that name?
No, I don't remember. It's been years, yeah.
Okay, so Jimmy Wendler used to train at Westside. He's one of the foremost producers of information related to powerlifting, and he's probably most well-known these days for his 5-3-1 program.
Okay.
And so he was a powerlifter. He was elite level powerlifter. I don't know his numbers. But he trained with Louis Simmons. He was one of the core group at Westside back in 2003, 2004, and maybe even longer. I'm not as familiar with all those specific dates. Some of your listeners would probably know better than me. But his hands were somewhat small. So he didn't do too much volume on grip training because it would thicken his hands. And when you get thicker hands, if you think about it, if you thicken your hands, then it almost creates like a distance from the center of gravity of the implement that you're lifting. So it can actually work against you in some cases. And I would say that the deadlift grip would be an example.
On the other hand, for an arm wrestler, thickening your hand can be very helpful because it makes it harder for the other person to hold your hand well.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Can I ask you, generally, over the years, have you noticed that there is you mentioned hand size, for example, being a limiting factor in some way, maybe the thumb length as well. Mm-hmm. So for example, I have very wide palms and very small fingers. Is this helpful for anything? Because usually what I see is the finger length is what's very helpful, and the smaller palm would be better. Isn't that so?
The palm size, definitely the fingers being longer would be an advantage, a big advantage. Palm size, if you were doing something like a cupping lift or a thumbless grip where you really were hooking your hand underneath, then I could see that a palm that's really fat would be an advantage. But right now I'm drawing a blank on anything else in Gripsport where a palm of that nature would be helpful. Maybe if it were something, where you were just trying to increase as much surface area that you could surface contact with the implement, then it might be helpful. But I'm just drawing a blank on a specific example.
I know it's very unfortunate. I wish I had longer fingers instead of the palm. But what I was going to ask also, more importantly, is the wrist diameter. Is there I remember there was a thread on Gripboard in some time around 2004 or 3 that they were noticing that maybe wrist circumference was a limiting factor, especially for wrist strength. Is that true at all?
I mean, that makes sense when you consider that the actual size of the muscle fibers is such a big determinant in what kind of strength the muscle will have. Then that makes sense. So you would figure the bigger the muscles in the wrist, also the bigger all-around size of the wrist. Now, as far as hardcore numbers of wrist sizes, I never really paid much attention to that. I would have been much more interested in knowing the actual dimensions of the person's hand. And even one thing, like if you hold your hand up, try to hold your hand up and like stretch your fingers apart as much as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so see how I'm going to try to mimic your hand. So your hand is kind of like this. See how your pinky is here? You're almost like an L position between the pinky and the thumb.
Yeah.
So the more that you can open your thumb up and create almost like a 180-degree flat line to the pinky, that's another determinant in how much coverage you can get on an implement.
Does that have to do with this skin stretching over time also?
Probably a little bit of the skin. I don't know how much that skin's going to stretch really, but it's more like the joint here and the mobility that you can get. I probably would imagine that it even has something to do with the way the bones are arranged here and how they articulate. And because if you have something where your thumb doesn't move past here, you're only going to be able to open your thumb so much, you know? So it really all goes into that, especially with block weightlifting. I can get really good coverage like that. Whereas some people whose hand kind of stays in this shape, they're not able to really get that same kind of coverage. And in order to stretch their hand over a blob or a block weight, it creates undue pressure in here that's uncomfortable, and it can be troublesome for them on a really big implement. So over the years, we've really tried to take that into consideration with what implements we use in competition, because these days everything is broken up by weight class, which I've always been. I tried to go the different direction. In 2005 and 2006, when we ran competitions, we broke it up by hand size categories.
Yeah, that's what I would think, right?
Yeah. So body weight, I mean, when you're closing a gripper, the size of your ass has nothing to do with that gripper close. Now, how strong your back is, your chest, your shoulders, yes, that can actually help you out with grip lifts, even with grippers, because you're able to produce tremendous tension, stabilize your shoulder, and all that makes your grip attempt more efficient, and you're able to really gather all this strength and make it all work together for a successful lift or a successful gripper close. But sheer body weight only goes so far. You'd have to be doing something where you need to be lifting a pretty large percentage of your body weight for body weight to really be a real big advantage. So in my opinion, it was always just better to avoid larger, unfair sized implements and lifts where body weight would be a determining factor. So, I didn't like to run the axle deadlift. I didn't think that was a real good event to run because it would be unfair for some people. Then you're also running into the problem with back injuries. A lot of people who have had back injuries would be at a disadvantage due on the axle due to the weight. And but at the same time, I've had some of the worst back injuries in grip, and I just saw it as I need to fix my back injuries. These days, thank God, and if I had some wood around here, I would knock on it. I haven't had serious back injuries since 2016. So I've really worked hard at correcting my back injuries, and it's resulted in a lot better results for me in my training because I've been healthy. I've been healthy for like 4 or 5 years now.
Were you hurting your back doing grip exercise?
I was hurting my back doing everything.
Oh.
I actually just this past weekend I tweaked my back catching a grasshopper for my daughter. Now, explain that to me. I don't know what the heck the problem was. I really don't know. Ended up being minor. I mean, that happened Sunday, and by Monday I was lifting pretty heavy and feeling pretty good. So that was a minor injury, but yeah, I've had very severe injuries doing grip, doing strongman, doing powerlifting, picking dumbbells up off the floor in order to do dumbbell bench press. But it's also been weird stuff. I was going to check the oil before I jumped in the car to go to the Arnold Classic one year, and as I reached down to hit the trigger to open up the hood, I tweaked my back.
Oh my God! You were competing at the Arnold? Is there a competition, a group sport competition there?
There was the Mighty Mitts competition was there from 2010 until 2013 or 14. I can't remember. And that was on the main stage. Now, in 2019, there was another competition. That was not on the main stage, but it was in one of the corridors at the Arnold. So, yeah. But I can't remember if I was competing that year. I don't remember what year it was. I just remember that it was very frustrating because I just hurt my back, and now I have to drive 8 hours to Ohio.
Yeah.
And it was a very, very uncomfortable ride. I went to Dubai in 2017. No, I guess it was the beginning of 2018. And I hurt my back shortly before that trip. And that's a 14-hour plane ride, brother, to Dubai. That was a tough trip. Very, very tough. So the episodes that I've had with my back have been very, very minor and spread out, few and far between. But, I just got to continue to do everything, strengthening the core, staying limber. I try to avoid sitting as much as possible. And probably I've been sitting too much, and that's why my back went out on Sunday. Is probably something was tight. There was stress in there, and I moved just right that I tweaked something. But like I said, it's back to pretty much 100% already now.
Yeah, there's some, I'm very into studying genes. There's some specific genetic polymorphisms that are very strongly associated with degenerative disc disease. So,
I'm sure. I agree with that 110%. So my dad's back is bad. He has 2 brothers. One of them has a bad back, and both of his daughters have a bad back.
Oh, wow.
And I think out of those 4 or 5 people, 3 of them have had surgery on their back. So I definitely can believe it has something to do with genetics and passing down through over the course of generations through the family.
I hope you stay healthy. I wanted to ask also, do you guys still have people come into the sport that are unusually gifted for hand strength? I mean, I'm not just talking about people who do manual labor, because for the audience to know, a lot of people who do manual labor like car mechanics and things like that will sometimes close, for example, number 2 captain of crush gripper on their first try. And they learned quite early on that people who do repetitive work with their hands have very strong hands.
Absolutely.
Are there people that come in the sport and have just gifts for hand strength as well?
So I can't think of anybody that's come into the sport and actually competed for like any length of time that has just walked off the street and been elite. But I mean, I can think of a time where we were doing strongman and grip training out in the yard one day. This was 2005, and some dude pulled in. He had his kid with him, and he was taller than me, so I'm 6'2", so he might have been 6'5", and he lifted the inch dumbbell.
Wow.
So I don't know what his background was. I have no idea, and I never saw him again. Like, we gave him our business cards. We're like, you're very good at this. You could do well. But now I'm drawing a blank on that one, dude. You're stumping me. You're stumping me today. I can't think of any examples right now of major names that have come into the sport and competed without a lot of training. But there's a guy in Australia right now. I can't remember if his first name is Joe or John, but his last name is Hodgson. It's like Hodgson, and he's pulling tremendous numbers on the events for the King Kong of Grip that's taking place at the end of October. I've never heard of this guy before. I don't know. I don't know how long he's been doing it. I don't know how he found out about it. There's not a lot of grip guys in Australia, so I don't know. I don't know what the deal is. They're out there, man. There's beasts out there for sure, but nobody that's really come into the sport and stuck around for a while. Most of the people that come in and do really well in their first competition and then stick around and dominate for a while are coming from some other background. And believe it or not, climbers are really, really good at grip. I think it has to do with such a variety of holds that they're doing when they're climbing and when they're training for climbing. So some names, like probably the best guy pound for pound in the world across the board, all the events, is Tanner Merkle from Texas. And he has a background in climbing. Another one who came onto the scene in 2016 is Gil Goodman. So I believe Tanner's around 211 pounds, maybe 215 now. He's put a lot of weight on, but when he came in, I think he was in the 83 kilo class. Maybe it was the 93 kilo class, but I think he was in the 83 kilo class when he started. There's a guy in Canada that came from climbing named Yves Gravel. He's in Ottawa, the province of, Ontario. Ontario is the province. I think the Ottawa area is where he's from. He might not be right in the city of Ottawa, but he's only, I want to say 160 pounds, maybe less. And he lifted the inch dumbbell like one of his first times trying it. For the listeners who aren't familiar, the inch dumbbell is a major challenge item. Like, there's three main things that people get into grip for: closing a number 3 gripper from ironmind, lifting the blob, which we already talked about. It's half of a 100-pound York dumbbell. And then the inch dumbbell is a 172-pound dumbbell with a handle that's like the size of a soda can. And most people cannot reach their hand around it and touch their finger and thumb together. There's generally a space. It's called the inch dumbbell because it's named after the person who created it, Thomas Inch, from the 1800s. Like, this is an old-time strongman from the classic years. So those are the three main things. And Eve, at 160 pounds, was able to lift this thing that weighs more than him, one-handed, very early on in his grip career, knowing almost nothing about it and just having the sheer hand strength from climbing to dominate that thick handle.
So I've been getting into climbing a bit recreationally, or I did before this virus attacked us. And I was finding that it's really interesting. In climbing, they grab the smallest like inserts into a wall,
Sure.
Sometimes half a centimeter, and they hold the body in a static position with a finger like that. That's what really attracted me to climbing. It's really interesting. So, and their hand has to be able to hold all kinds of different shapes.
Yeah.
Always static, and often holding their whole body from one hand and from just a small. So I assume that they have a very varied kind of static strength in their hands, especially climbers. Yeah,
they a lot of times the only weakness that a climber has is the lack of awareness of technique for grippers. Then once you teach them how to close grippers, then they're smashing threes. Pinch strength can be a problem for them because they're not always using their thumb as much. But anything that has to do with the fingers that relies on massive finger strength, they don't have any trouble with it.
Now, the number 4 captain of crush gripper, when I was into the sport and on the forums, I recall that there was only 4 or 5 people who had closed it. And there was sort of a murky story about the last fellow who had closed it, I think, who basically, there was a story that he damaged his hands really severely by trying to close it. And he left the sport sort of afterwards. First of all, maybe you can comment on that, whether it's true or not. Did he hurt himself? And second of all, I wanted to know, do you think the number 4 is a credible goal for most people? And is there a danger of harming yourself to close it? Does it mean that you're going to get arthritis or, you know?
Okay, so I don't know of any research that correlates grip training to arthritis. Yeah. So I don't want to call it a myth. I would just say it's unsubstantiated. The number 4 is probably out of reach for most people. So I'm not saying 99% of people. I'm saying 99.9999. You can go with a bunch of nines there. And that's the percentage of people who are never going to close a number 4. I think the person that you're referring to is Joe Kinney.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. So I believe there are 5 people who are certified for closing the number 4. That was up until, I believe, 2004. Okay. Around 2004, they changed the requirement. So this is a number 4 here, the one that I was just repping out.
That was a number?
No. Okay. I'm just kidding.
Well, I know I think you're pretty close to closing a 4, though, right?
I used to be. Not anymore. I can't stand grippers. I can't even believe there happened to be one here on my desk, man. I don't even know how that worked out. So basically, back in the day, you could set it to about this position, almost parallel. The rules were the last inch of space had to be clear, and the judge had to be able to see that you left that much space. Then you could close it down. Around 2000, it might have been 2005. Dude, I've forgotten the year. I'm not sure. But at some point, 04, 05, they changed it so that you had to have a credit card space between the handles. And you had to actually slide the card between the handles. All right? And then close it down. So nobody has certified on the number 4 since then. There are people who have closed the number 4 since 2004 with one of those deeper sets. There's plenty. There's probably been a dozen that have done it. Still not very many, but there's more than what's on the list. And there's a couple people. Nathan Holle is an example of someone who has closed a number 4 gripper with a credit card. There's been other people that have been close. John Vogt is a person from the United States who was very, very close. I want to say back in 2008, 2009. He experienced some very serious injuries from gripper training. To my understanding, it came from gripper training. And I don't know that he's even involved in any grip training of any sort these days. The thing that gets people with gripper training is the eccentrics. So they'll do negatives. They'll try to cheat a gripper down to close, and then they'll fight that gripper open all the way to the fully open position. And that drill is called a severe negative. I don't teach those. What I do with my clients is I teach you close it down, and then you fight it to about the parallel position, and then you just let it open up.
Oh.
Okay. So if any of the people watching and listening today train grippers, my recommendation is to not fight a negative past parallel at all. You don't need to. So
there was a program called the KTA program that had a lot of severe negatives. I used that from not closing the trainer when I was 16 or so to closing the 2 in about 6 months. But then I had severe tendinitis, and I couldn't close a gripper for a year and a half.
Unfortunately, that's the problem. That program is highly dependent on volume, as I recall.
Yeah.
And probably a more moderate approach to the negatives. Even the severe negatives could be beneficial, but the thing is, your hands will respond to severe training. They really will. The problem is they will also get injured by severe training as well. So I take a much more conservative approach in my training and with my clients. To talk on Joe Kinney a little bit, there is a belief out there that his story was somewhat fabricated in order to sell more grippers and make the allure of grippers even more grand. I can't say that that's the truth because I don't know Joe Kinney. I wasn't around when he closed the number 4. I think it was 2001 or 2002 when he certified on the number 4. It was before I found out about grip. There's just a lot of things, and we don't need to go into all that, but there's just a lot of things about that whole story that seem a little fishy to me. And based on my research and my experience and talking with people, it just seems a little far-fetched. So I don't give a lot of credence, but the story is after all the training that he did for the number 4, he did have some injuries, and because of that, he quit training. So, I mean, the problem is it's just tough to believe as someone like myself who's been involved for close to 20 years now, which I can't even believe it's been that long, but it's like 17, 18 years of solid grip training. I just have a hard time believing that story. So I just caution anybody who does further research, because I'm such a dramatically, engaging personality, and everybody that listens to this is going to go out and do grip training. When you go and you research, just take some of those stories with a grain of salt, because it's hard to discern what's 100% fact and what isn't. That's the only thing.
The thing that stood out to me, I recall that, and this is, almost 20 years ago that I had read the story, but I recall that there was a story about him developing a machine which he was using to crush with I guess, plates. And yes. So he was the only person among the 4 closers, I think, that had that technique. And I don't think that works for many other people because it's slightly a different position. Well, by the way, how does that work? They still sell those machines at Ironmind? I have a couple of them, actually. And I think Soren may sell them. Do those apply to other activities, crushing activities or otherwise?
I definitely think gripper-style machines can be beneficial. When I'm working with somebody, A, I want to keep them healthy and not get hurt. And B, I like to design programs based on stuff that I've done in my own training or that someone I really know well and trust has told me about. There's not a lot of people out there who have credited gripper machines with their excellence on grippers. In almost all cases, they have gotten really good at grippers by investing in a lot of grippers. And they're able to assemble collections of grippers where they're able to close grippers in steps. In other words, they're working up a ladder of gripper strength. Keep in mind, I got involved in this in 2002. So back in those days, there were different gripper companies that produced more grippers, and you were able to fill holes a little bit more easily. These days, there are new gripper companies that have come out. I'm not 100% sure where all the grippers lie anymore because I don't collect grippers. I really don't like grippers that much. So my collection is pretty much where it's at. Unless I see somebody like selling grippers at like yard sale prices, I'm not buying any more grippers. My spaces are pretty much filled. But I have a collection of about 100 grippers. Wow. And in most cases, I have like 2 to 4 pound jumps in between my grippers. And that really has proven to be a much better way to train for grippers that's reliable than gripper machines. Even people that have bought gripper machines from my friend Luke Raymond, who runs Arm Assassin Strength Shop, You really don't hear of those people with gripper machines that all of a sudden are on the scene closing threes and higher and then crediting back to those machines. So I'm not sure I've ever written a gripper program with a gripper machine in there. It's pretty much always grippers.
Actually, you make me a little bit curious about this. Do you write bespoke programs for people, or do you sell ebooks or programs like that? How do you coach people in the sport?
Yeah, I have several products related to grippers. I have a DVD called Crush, which is really a complete exploration of all the training techniques, drills, and such for grippers, as well as just form mechanics and technique for closing grippers efficiently. I have an 8-week program called cadence-based training, which lays out an 8-week cycle of gripper training, and it's been very effective at helping people move up on grippers. I also have at least one, maybe two workouts that I've sold, just individual workouts that people can do for their gripper training. And then I have written programs for people, and I've also done virtual coaching. I've done virtual coaching since 2013 or 2014. And by far that's been the best way for me to set up a training protocol for someone and then help them over the course of the period of time with improving their grippers and also other areas that they're interested in. So the gripper program that I sell, cadence-based training, is really designed for people who are looking to specialize on grippers over the course of a 2-month period, more or less. Whereas the coaching enables me to find out more about the person's individual goals, and then I can tailor a program to them based on those goals and help them progress on everything across the board throughout that period.
Do you have them videotape their lifts
Oh, absolutely. I won't even coach someone on grippers unless they have the ability to send video files, because it really doesn't matter what you do in your training. If your technique with the grippers and your set is not right, then the training effort won't correlate to better performance. You really have to, unless you're just absolutely like huge hands and just an absolute brute, and you can just move those handles. Those are the beasts that I'm talking about that are lurking around that nobody knows about. They're just so exceptionally strong, they don't need to use the technique. But the people that, I've had people, one story, I was out to Spokane, Washington. I was supposed to run a grip contest, but nobody signed up. So instead, I assisted with the strongman competition. Because I was being paid to run this contest. It was a service that I was providing at like an expo out there. Well, I felt bad because no one signed up, so I helped out with the strongman competition, and I got to know a bunch of the people. We were talking. There's this one guy, Patrick was his first name. I've forgotten his last name. After the contest, we were getting together, and he's like, "Yeah, I love these grippers," and he showed me how he was closing. I'm like, "No, my gosh!" So he was closing a trainer, couldn't close a one. I was like, dude, you gotta change your technique up before I'm sick right now. I was gonna vomit. It was so ugly. And by the time I was done with this guy, 100% serious, he was closing a 2.5. And It was like 5 minutes. In 5 minutes, I took him from a trainer to a 2.5. So what do we know about that guy? That dude was already super strong because he was a strongman competitor. He won his weight class. I think he was in maybe the under 200 or something like that. He was a lighter weight guy, and he was super strong. I mean, the weight they were carrying in the farmers and stuff, I mean, it was like 300 pounds per hand. That's serious weight. He just didn't know the technique with the grippers. And when I was able to show him the technique, we were able to take that strength and really focus it. And he was just smashing every gripper that I had. He might have been able to go a little bit higher, but I just didn't have all my grippers with me.
The one thing I'm curious about in general in terms of hand strength training is frequency, because what I learned from the KTA program when I did it, which it was very effective, but what we were doing was training 6 days a week, taking 1 day off, And what we would find is that we would be weaker the day after the 1 day off. Suddenly we'd be a little bit weaker. And then over time in the program, we actually got, I would say, well, maybe it was pain, but we seemed to get slightly weaker. But after the program's duration, which was several weeks, I'd take a week off and then I would be much stronger. So there was like I guess like a
super compensation.
Yeah, exactly. And we were carrying a load of work that we weren't recovering from. Do you do that? And do you recommend that to people? Or do you do that for blob training? I'm not just talking about grippers, in general.
Yeah. I do that, but I do it very, very close to a contest and only right before I know I'm going to be able to have a week off. So I've mentioned his name before, Rick Walker. At the competition that he held in 2003, after the competition was done, dude, we stood out in his garage and I think we did grip stuff for like 2 hours, 3 hours. He goes, and I remember him saying, I bet if you took a week off after all the work that we just did, that you'd PR. I can hear him saying it to this day. And I didn't take a week off when I got home. But prior to every other contest that I've ever done, I've taken pretty much a week off. I might train up until Tuesday if a contest is on Saturday, but I'm getting the majority of that week off. And I don't do any training during that time. So let's just say Tuesday is my last grip day. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, I don't do any training whatsoever. And by Saturday, I'm PRing. So for instance, in the two hands pinch event, I broke the world record in the two hands pinch 5 separate times.
Wow.
I think I'm the only person to do that. I think I'm the only person that's ever done it twice in the same contest. My method back then was to specialize my training on two-hand pinch and maybe one other event in the contest. So I never won any contest. I never won anything, but I would break the record in the pinch, and I did that for like 2 or 3 years. But I couldn't win in a contest. I got sick of getting beaten by people who I felt I could beat, and I had some rivalries going, so I kind of changed my approach, and instead of always training for the pinch and like 1 and maybe 2 other things, I would train for everything equally, and I saw a better improvement. To go back to your question, what I would do back then is I would focus on the pinch at least 3 times a week. So I would do just your normal lifts we'll call it lockout. It's not lockout, but to the height requirement, we'll call it lockout. I would do holds. I would do band resisted. I would do chain resisted. So I took a bunch of pages out of like the West Side training methods, and I applied it to grip strength and kind of they call it the
Conjugate
Method. Thank you. So I was doing much of that stuff: speed work, holds, eccentrics. There was one time where I had a guy come down and help me pick the implement up, and then I would try to control it down to the floor. I was doing all that stuff. By the end of the thing, I might be able to lift 200 pounds in training with just a normal lift. My hands were shot. I was sore. I would take a week off. I would break the record. And I did that for 2 or 3 years.
Do you guys still do the hot and cold baths for the hands after working out? That used to be popular in the early days when I was on the farm.
Well, so I definitely used to do that all the time. Yeah. I used to do that all the time. In fact, in 2012, when I worked with Paul Knight, do you know Paul Knight? You know that name?
I've actually heard his name. I don't know.
One of the best gripper guys in all of the United States, especially during the time when he was competing. Had a huge following online. Had a YouTube channel. All that jazz. To this day, he can still close a 3.5 and never trains grip.
Wow.
He also came from climbing. He was a climber prior to grip. And when he was coaching me, he had me do the contrast baths after every gripper workout. So I don't recall how many days a week it was. I want to say it was 2 days a week. And it was quite heavy volume, quite high volume. and I would go up to my sink and I would fill one side with water and then a bunch of ice. The other side was as hot as I could possibly stand it without scalding myself. And I would go back and forth. The trick to this, if you do this, is to move your hands underneath the water. When you do that, it's like the cold and the hot soaks in even more intensely. And there were times where it was so cold I wanted to cry. Like I could feel it in my bones. I was like, what am I doing to my hands? But I would always end on the hot water. And then I always seem to recover really well. I always seem to recover really well from that.
But you get lazy to do it, right? Is that why you don't still do it all the time? It takes so much time.
You know, I just, over the years, I figured out that I didn't need that kind of volume.
Oh,
I didn't need that kind of volume. I could spread the volume out over 3 to 4 days. And 3 or 4 days per week, I mean. So for each training week, I would spread the volume out, and I just figured out how I could get like basically an optimum amount of volume, still be able to recover and see progress. So I didn't need the extra techniques. I just didn't need them anymore. And if you want to try that, you definitely can. It may be a good practice for you or for anyone listening. But no, I these days I don't do that unless I have something that I'm like, well, I think I injured something here. I pulled something, I tweaked something. I'm going to have to do a little bit more stuff to recover. Then I'll do some of that. But that might be one time a year, to be honest with you.
Jedd, I'm aware of your time. I just want to ask a couple of more questions I would be remiss if I didn't ask about. The first one I wanted to ask about is we have a lot of bodybuilders on the channel, and they're interested a lot in their aesthetics. One thing I noticed that was pretty interesting is when I was very into Gripsport when I was a teenager, my forearms actually had a different character than they do now in terms of maybe not their size, but I had a tremendous amount of detailed lines on the side of my forearms. Yeah. And I don't think that can be gotten with just wrist curls. It has something to do with the intricacies of hand strength. Do you think there's any purpose for Gripsport with people who are purely interested in aesthetics, who may be interested in changing the look of their forearms?
That's a great question. That is a great question. And I too have noticed that over the years, my forearms have become more defined, especially when under tension, because I don't approach my diet in a way that's anywhere close to a bodybuilder's diet. I'm not lean anymore. I have love handles, but at the same time, it's not one of my goals to be super ripped. So in most cases, I'm not going to see that definition unless I'm under tension. The muscle has grown from grip training. But I think probably, to throw some stuff in there every so often for someone who's more interested in aesthetics, I don't think it's a mistake. I don't think it's going to be bad for you, because it's certainly not a bad idea to make your hands stronger so that you can do things without the use of straps. I know a lot of bodybuilders. Hell, even me back in the day, dude, the first thing I did, I had my belt and I had my wrist straps and my wrist wraps and my straps. They were right on my belt. First thing I did, put my belt on, cinch that sucker up tight, put my wrist wraps on, and I would put my straps on ready for the first pulling exercise. If anyone is becoming really dependent on straps in their pulling, and they're doing stuff that's sub-maximal for their hand strength and using straps on it, I think that's a mistake. I think moving away from straps on things like rows, pull-downs, pull-ups, seated rows, I think it can be a way to build your forearms while you're working the gripping muscles. Even though you're doing bodybuilding exercises and not grip exercises, you're still taxing your grip a little bit more. And I think that's going to bring about a little bit better development in the forearms. But I don't think that you can really get away from the core exercises of forearm training. So like every so often I'll put forearm training stuff in there and I'll get a massive pump on. I like that. So behind the back wrist curls I find are not, they don't strain my wrist. They're very, very safe for my wrist. I can move a lot of weight. I can do a lot of reps. So I'll do those. I like loading up an easy curl bar and doing wrist extensions on my lap. I'll do reverse curls quite frequently. Probably a couple times a month I'll do reverse curls. I used to make sure to do them every single week in order to keep away tennis elbow and inflammation in the big muscle here, the brachioradialis, because I've had problems with that. I've had problems with that many, many times over the years, especially when I was newer to grip. But when I started out, I've always had this mentality where I didn't want to get hurt. I didn't want to do anything that was going to hurt me and not allow me to train, because I look at training as probably something like, you know, the way some people look at meditation or, you know, other kinds of therapy. I look at training as being very important to me in those regards. So I don't want to miss any workouts. And, you know, for years, my back was what would keep me from doing workouts. So I was like, all right, I got to do something about this. But right from the get-go with grip, before I did any grip training, I did a ramp-up program for my forearms, which involved, I started for like a couple weeks, I did forearms once a day. And then for a couple weeks for a couple weeks, I did forearms 1 day a week. For a couple weeks, I did forearms 2 days a week. And then I worked up to 3 days a week for a couple weeks. And that was before I really did any grip training at all, because I wanted to try to condition my lower arms to that kind of workload, right? Because I knew what I was getting into based on the people who were posting. You know, I didn't know what I was doing. I had no idea. So I was just following what other people were doing. And the volume that everyone was doing back then just seemed so high. That's right when KTA came out, you know, and I wanted to get results, but I didn't want to get hurt. So I wanted to try to lay that foundation in my forearm. So yeah, I think you can supplement with some grip training, especially thick bar work, throwing thick bar stuff. Like the fat grips are some of the best implements on the market. The marketing has gotten a little out of hand at times, and people think they become too dependent on it. But I think it's a great way to supplement your training with some thick bar. And for $35-40, I mean, those grip implements, those fat grips, they're never going to break. They're never going to wear out. They're never going to not work. And you can throw them in your backpack. So whatever bag you're taking to the gym with it, you could easily throw those in there, and they're not going to cause a problem. So I think they're a good thing to add into your training without having to focus on like lifting blobs and stuff like that. So it's really about like using your time wisely and getting the most out of the stuff that you do choose to do. So hopefully that's answered your question for like the people that are mostly looking for size and aesthetics.
Do you notice that arm wrestlers tend to have the most wrist strength out of the group, or are there grip sport people with better wrist curls than the arm wrestlers?
No, I would say if you gave me 10 people from arm wrestling that weighed like 205, and then 10 grip guys that weighed 205, and then we did 5 arm wrestling movements that tax the wrist and 5 grip training moves that tax the wrist, I bet the arm wrestling guys would win probably 7 out of those 10.
Yeah, I noticed because that's a lot of it is this wrist, the wrist curl.
Those guys are tremendously strong.
They also oddly have strong pinkies, because that's the holding position. That's the most important finger for arm wrestling. Right.
So I don't do a lot of the arm wrestling training, but like I said, one of my best friends in the world, Luke Raymond, he's an elite arm wrestler for his weight class. Or at least he was a couple years ago. I don't know how all that's defined. Like every tournament I've gone to with him, he's won the right hand.
Wow.
And he's gone to a lot more than the ones that I've gone to, and he's won a bunch of those. And he won nationals in like 2016 or 2017. He won nationals for AWAL. Oh. So, I guess the point is,
I just don't remember the name. Yeah, I must know.
Yeah, no problem. He makes great training equipment. At armassassin.com.
Oh, I know the Arm Assassins group. They're on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The Arm Assassins group is like separate. So he used that name for his company, and he has the octopus design.
Yeah, I've seen
it's
that.
in the background of a lot of my videos. But I guess the point I was going after was with the pinky. He does a lot of stuff where he combines wrist flexion, ulnar deviation, and then the rotation of the hand.
Yeah. And
a lot of that involves using that pinky, and the objective is to be able to control the opponent's hand. Because if you think about it, that's going to be the weakest finger, so it's something that your opponent is going to attack. So he's been able to train that. And like, you know, in 2016 when he started arm wrestling quite frequently, he made a table. Like, he taught himself welding. No big deal. Just, I'll teach myself welding. And I felt like back in those days, that I could do a little stuff with his hand. You know, being someone, again, I don't like to get hurt, so you're never going to see me arm wrestle, dude. It's not going to happen. People beg me on my YouTube to arm wrestle all the time. It ain't going to happen. All right? I'm not going to play golf because I'll get obsessed with that, and I'll be out on the course all day. And I'm not going to do arm wrestling because I'll get obsessed with that too. It ain't going to happen. But back in the day, I felt like I could have actually done something with him and maybe pinned him if we actually arm wrestled. Today, no. I can't do anything with him. I can't do anything. He's got so much strength. My raw, not knowing what I'm doing technique, it ain't gonna cut it anymore, bro.
Our mutual friend Bedr used to have. I haven't arm wrestled with him in a long time, but he used to be a very good arm wrestler also, even though he had no arm wrestlers to train with over in Dubai.
Bedr's hand, it feels like you're grabbing the padded thumb area of a baseball catcher's mitt.
Yeah,
he's got one of those thick hands that it's like this. I just happen to have a bottle of ketchup right here. It's like you're arm wrestling a bottle of ketchup when you're arm wrestling better. So I think strength-wise, I could probably, if I could just hook him, I could probably pull him across the table and maybe end up on the mat. Again, I don't know a damn thing about arm wrestling. I haven't put any time in. So if I could overpower somebody, I might be able to do that. But as far as like if he got me into a precarious position where it would require technique to overcome his hand strength, it's not going to happen, bro. It's not going to happen.
So a couple of last questions. One of the...
Sure. Well, I have time, dude, so don't feel rushed. I have some time, so let's go ahead and cover everything.
Okay, cool.
I also like to hear myself talk.
Well, I'm glad you do. You're really kidding us. I wanted to ask you about bending, because we didn't talk about bending at all. Is it still popular in the sport? I mean, that's one of the things that Bedr used to be really into, if I recall correctly.
Yeah. Bending is pretty much separate now. Bending is pretty much its own discipline.
Interesting.
So they hold bending competitions and online bending challenges now that are completely separate from Gripsport. I'm quoted, and I'll say it to this day, that I feel like you don't need a strong grip to be good at steel bending. You need a good grip. You know, you need a good solid grip, but you don't need a strong grip. You don't need to be an elite gripster by any means to be able to bend steel. You need to be strong enough to bend the steel, and you need to have good technique. That's so important. The technique is so important. Let's see. Maybe I can think of somebody.
I mean, the thing about bending is I feel like it puts it's not a natural kind of movement. And at least for me, it really aggravated my tendinitis when I was
sure.
Doing. Does that happen?
Oh yeah, dude. When I first started with grip and strongman, I was doing bending too. I had double golfer's elbow. So both arms, golfer's elbow, both arms, tennis elbow. Like, I was buying stock in ibuprofen because I could not even start a workout unless I had like 5 or 6 of them babies. And I was taking Advil back then, man, because I wanted that candy flavor. You know, these days I'm not as dependent on the ibuprofen, so I just get regular like dollar store ibuprofen because I don't need the nice flavor to go along with it. But
that stuff is really harsh on the kidneys, though.
Yeah, I try not to take it any more than I have to.
And that's the problem with arm wrestling. There's so much pain in that sport. Everybody has to take ibuprofen all the time.
I'm allergic to pain, man. I'm allergic to pain, and it's like, I'm lucky enough, like I can walk through a field of poison ivy, and like I swear the stuff like just bows down away from me because I've never gotten it. Poison ivy, poison oak, bee stings don't bother me. I can eat all the peanuts in the world and nothing happens. I've got no allergies. Like every medicine they give me, I'm like, I get better from it. I don't get any worse. No side effects. But pain is just like debilitating to me. So I don't go anywhere near it. But yeah, bending, if you're doing it wrong or if you try to do too much too soon, you're going to be hurting.
Yeah.
And you can hurt and you can injure yourself. You can get a serious injury. You got to know how to do it. I can't think of a name right now, but like there's been plenty of people who've picked up my bending ebook or my bending DVD who they were stuck at like they couldn't do yellow nails. And by the end of, a month, 2 months, they were bending red nails and getting certified.
And bending sort of developed out of the feats of strength kind of
yeah.
Like in Gripsport, just for the audience to know, there are feats of strength like ripping apart a phone book with your bare hands, which takes some technique, but they also require strength. And then there's also, I think, like popping a soda bottle, a soda can.
Soda can, yeah.
Yeah, that's...
Or a beer can is a lot easier because beer cans are thinner.
Oh.
So most times you won't see people popping soda cans very much. That takes another level of strength. Beer cans are much more commonly popped. But I wouldn't recommend doing that either unless someone like uses pretty serious like manual labor gloves, like work gloves on their hands, because you go and cut one of those tendons in your finger, and now if you have a manual labor job, you're out of work for weeks, if not months, and your lifestyle is seriously hindered. So you have to take safety into consideration with all this stuff.
Well, bringing up tendons, one of the biggest curiosities I have is how to avoid tendinitis. Because I stopped weightlifting recently, and I'm looking for a hobby that's in a strength sport that won't be harmful for my long-term health. And Gripsport, one of the great things about it is, as you said, it doesn't have much to do with your body weight. You don't have to be huge or muscular or put your body at great harm's risk. And also, to be honest, I don't think even steroids are very useful for a grip sport. They don't even probably help at all.
I've never met anybody who has actually told me they were on steroids that does grip sport.
Mm.
So I don't there's plenty of people that say, oh, you would beat him if he wasn't on the juice. Well, to me, it never mattered if they were on the juice anyway, because I would train my ass off and try to beat them anyhow. But I can tell you that from talking with Luke, he knows a lot of arm wrestlers that are using those steroids, PEDs, whatever, and it's very beneficial for them. I don't know how much those guys are seeing like improvement in their squat, bench, deadlift from it. I think, and I definitely don't know any of them that have gone from like pinching 25s to 45s because they were using steroids. But I think the ability to recover, because arm wrestlers do quite frequent training too. I think a lot of them train, 3 times a week plus. Plus they have marathon sessions on weekends when they all get together in their groups. So I think the biggest thing there would be the recovery. So if a grip guy was training 4 or 5 times a week with really marathon style workouts, probably the PEDs would be helpful to them for the recovery, I would imagine. But it's all speculation at this point because I've never taken any of that stuff. So I don't know.
I have some expertise on that subject. I think that, there is probably, maybe I misspoke. There probably must be an immediate improvement because of androgenic signaling that you get from like the same kind of thing you'd get from a pre-workout where your nerves are just firing a little bit better. Yeah. So, for example, there are certain PEDs like Anadrol that have an immediate strength impact, or halotestin, things that Mike Tyson was known to take, halotestin in his fights, and some fighters take that stuff, that have an immediate effect in making your nerves fire better. So there is that. But the thing is, in terms of recovery, like I don't know about Gripsport, but arm wrestling, I was into arm wrestling, and I know a lot of arm wrestlers who take PEDs also. And what I found is that they're completely useless the first 5 or 6 years you're arm wrestling, because there's so much of an impact of your tendons and strengthening tissue that doesn't get much blood circulation anyway, that has little to do with your muscular power. What usually you'll notice in arm wrestling is that some people will start out and become like to an expert level of arm wrestling, and then they'll suddenly grow. Like you can clearly tell so for example, famously this happened to Dmitry Trubin. He's also called the Optimus Prime in arm wrestling. He's a former Kazakh, current Russian arm wrestler. He was like, I think I would say like maybe 200 pounds or so. Now he's almost 300 pounds. He just, and there was a better example actually. Levan Saginashvili. He's probably you've heard of him, the Georgian arm wrestler, huge guy. He won the top 8 tournament last year. He was a normal sized guy. He's about 6'1", and he was probably 190 pounds. And now he's 400 pounds.
Wow.
Yeah, he just looked like he ate himself. He completely... Seriously, I should send you a video. It's called The Rise of Levan Saginashvili. It's like a compilation. And you see, within 10 minutes, you see him go from 190 pounds to 400 pounds and just destroy everyone in the sport. But usually in arm wrestling, it takes years for the actual joints and to be adapted to arm wrestling. And unfortunately, to be honest, I think a lot of the adaptations, and this is why I don't arm wrestle most anymore, is because a lot of the adaptations are actually injuries that just... how arm wrestlers, I don't know if you noticed, they can't extend their arms fully a lot of the time.
Right.
And that's helpful for them, but it's actually an injury. So you're slowly... I already have like slightly bad knees. I didn't want to have bad arms, also shoulders, elbows. Whereas I think in grip sport, a lot of people don't have long-term injuries from the actual grip sport.
Yeah, and I was talking about some back injuries that I've had earlier, and I want to just say that those back injuries are most likely from problems that I got from sitting down at work for like 9 years. For 9 years straight, I sat every single day of my life. So I think a lot of that stuff came from like tight hip flexors and, never addressing my psoas or anything like that. So the times that I've gotten hurt in grip, it was probably an injury that was about ready to happen, and I probably would have done it catching that grasshopper or triggering the latch on the hood, but I just happened to be lifting grip that day and I tweaked something. So yeah, I agree. One of the things about grip is someone will come from like a powerlifting or strongman background and they're all beat up and they're looking for something that they can do that will satisfy that need to compete, and they turn to grip and they find that their body can handle that for a long time because it's not nearly as demanding on their body as those other sports were.
Yeah, like strongman is notorious for that. Strongman almost everybody develops injuries over time. But the weird thing about arm wrestling, and I love arm wrestling, I still watch it and everything like that, but the actual injuries help you. So it's like you're getting hurt, you're sort of damaging your arm to make it better for arm wrestling, which makes it worse for every other sport because you can, well, except bicep curls, I guess, because you can't extend your arm fully anymore. I mean, You can think of how you've heard of Monster Michael Todd, the American arm wrestler.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he can't extend his arm past here. This is the whole movement he can do. And Dmitry Siplenkov, who I'm sure you've heard of because of his walnut crushing hands.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Siplenkov, if you look at a picture, he has sort of a Tyrannosaurus Rex.
Yes.
Where he can't extend his arm anymore.
He walks around like this.
Exactly.
Like I've also noticed they get so heavily internally rotated from
True, they can't do a bicep flexing thing. The shoulder won't go out like that.
Right.
And Devin Larratt right now, the Canadian arm wrestler, he's actually recently developed this, where intentionally, where it seems to be, because he's trying to get this thing called the King's Move. Have you heard of the King's Move in arm wrestling?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he's trying to do the King's Move, and you can see now he has the T-Rex thing going also. So, I mean, they're willing to do it because they love the sport, but I feel like injuring yourself for a sport is, compared to Gripsport, where you don't need to injure yourself to do well at all, and injuring yourself will hurt you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, though, about sorry, one second. I wrote down some notes while we were talking.
Sure.
We discussed frequency. Oh, I actually covered most things. Oh, great. Well, Jedd, I really have to thank you because you've been so generous with your time and you covered so many things with us.
Sure.
We didn't completely touch on the frequency, how often you work out per week and how often you think people should work out with their. I mean, obviously it depends on the volume, but how do you guide that? How many days do you
Yeah, so I currently do. So I'm training more often now than I have in years, and I'll actually credit Devin Larrett for a conversation that I had with him when I was in Canada earlier this year for a competition. He came over to Eric Rusain's house. He didn't compete, but he hung around for a long time, and it was just a pleasure. It was a pleasure to spend some time with him and talk with him. And at the time, I was only training on 3 days. I was training 5:30 in the morning on Tuesday for body, and then Tuesday afternoon for grip. Thursday morning, 5:30 in the morning for body, and then Thursday afternoon for grip. And then Saturday morning, I would do like a 3 or 4 hour grip workout.
Wow.
And he got talking about frequency and stuff like that. We really got into that topic. And I was like, maybe I should change that up. Well, lo and behold, in March, all of this COVID shit happened, right? All this COVID stuff took place.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. So I ended up training so I don't know if you know, I own a gym. I do classes on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And I had a 5 o'clock class, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They had some young, strong dudes in the class. The last thing I wanted to have happen, not knowing how long the lockdown was going to take place, was for them to lose everything that they've worked so hard for. Because these guys were not training for like sports and stuff. They were just training like me, just to be big and strong, right? So I used to train at my garage in my house. I hadn't done that in years, probably 2 solid years. So we moved a bunch of stuff back to my house. We started doing, and this is my training split now, no more morning stuff because it's just too hard. It's too hard on my body. I can't get woken up. I had to like be down here half an hour ahead of time to loosen up. It just doesn't work anymore. So we started lifting at 5 p.m. on Monday, Wednesday, Friday together as a group. That's all body workouts for an hour. And then Tuesday, Thursday afternoon, I do grip for like 3 hours. Saturday morning, I do grip for 3 or 4 hours. So now I'm doing 6 days a week training, and my strength levels are up higher than they've ever been, at least since like 2004. 2004 and 2005, I was 25, 26, 27 years old. So I was at the pinnacle of my strength. That's when I was doing strongman competitions and things. My squat was up around 500 plus. Deadlift was 500 plus. My bench was like 400. So I may never reach those numbers again. But just recently, I did my first 600-pound trap bar lift. I just did last week a 535 double overhand barbell deadlift. So those are some of the best numbers I've ever had. I never did 600 before. Even all those times when I was deadlifting 500 plus, I never did 600 ever on anything. So not even with like a high farmer's pick did I ever total 600 pounds. So my frequency has gone up, but I'm still managing the volume. The body workouts are only an hour. And they're very intense. So like the first half of the session is strength based, and after that it's all accessory and like bodybuilding style work. And I only do 1 lower body session a week to manage the volume for my back. And then the grip stuff, yeah, I train 2 to 4 hours per session, but at the same time, that is very highly specialized for Gripsport and grip feats. So I might only do 3 or 4 exercises in those 2 to 4 hours. Well, during the Tuesday and Thursday, I might only train like 2 to 4 exercises, right? But I might do 20 sets.
Why? This is really surprising to me. 3 to 4 hours seems like a great deal of time to be doing.
It sounds like it, but when you realize that it's not. If it was bodybuilding for 3 to 4 hours, I would probably be destroyed. I would probably be like headache, severely hungry, stuff like that. But it's not. It's grip, man. It's like washing your car for 3 hours. It's not really demanding physically because the weights are so sub-maximal compared to what my body is able to lift. So even if I'm doing, I have a 200-pound a 200-pound challenge bell. So it's basically an inch dumbbell that weighs 200 pounds. I might do a couple sets, maybe 10 sets of singles with that, but it's still only 200 pounds. So it's not really taxing on my body. I get out of breath if I do things called grip rushes, which is like a 60 seconds AMRAP. Try to lift it as many times as I can in 60 seconds. I'll get out of breath and stuff, but then I'll take 10 minutes to recover and I'll go do something else. So the rest periods, there's a lot of rest periods in those grip workouts. So
you find that your strength declines through the 3 hours?
No. Not at all.
Really?
No. Mm-mm. Nope.
Yeah, Devin is actually like an amazing theorist for arm wrestling training. He does all kinds of light exercises throughout the day to get his neural connections moving right.
Yeah, dude. Multiple times a day he trains. Multiple times.
It's incredible. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And I guess there's a lot of reason to do that for grip strength also, because a lot of it is neural connections and stuff. I think that's one of the reasons the KTA program worked so well for me, because there was twice a day exercises, but maybe the volume was too much or the severe negatives were too much. I don't know what it was exactly. I'm looking, by the way, so how is Gripsport turning out now, 20 years down you? I mean, you've almost been in the sport 20 years. Has it grown a lot? How is the grip board? Does it still exist? Are there people on Reddit? Are there other places?
Okay, that's a great topic. So, yeah, the grip board's still around. I would say there's probably the same number of, it seems like there's probably the same or slightly less number of people that are highly active on the board. I almost never go there anymore. I just don't have time to do it. I've got the gym business and my online business. I'm just tapped out, so I don't get on there too much, but it seems to be pretty active when I do get on there to like announce a contest, or if someone has a specific question relating to something that's on there, then I'll go in there and weigh in with my opinion. The sport is growing. There's two federations now. And quite frankly, the other federation that I'm not involved in firsthand is they have much better marketing than I do. So when it comes to being online and marketing, I'm usually marketing myself or my business, not so much the sport. So that's been a problem for growing it much further. But as far as like the number of people competing, there's more people competing in grip than ever right now. Yeah.
Are there other YouTube channels other than your own about grip?
Yeah. So it's funny. The last couple of years, I would say it's almost turned into like people will choose one method of social media and they will stick with that method versus spreading out over multiple. So I still do Facebook, I have Instagram, and I do YouTube. My Facebook has mainly become, well, from March to May, my Facebook time was dedicated to the coronavirus, which I'm not really proud of, but that's just how it turned out. And then there's something wrong with my phone. So like this top region up here doesn't sense anything that I do up top.
Yeah.
And so if I can't turn my phone and do it this way, then I can't use my phone for stuff. So I don't upload much to Instagram because only about 1 out of 20 times my phone will actually sense like the upload, the submit or upload or whatever the button is. Because for some reason you can't turn your phone and Instagram works, at least not on a Android device, right? Darn Instagram. So I guess you asked about YouTube channels. I don't know. There's not as many YouTube channels as you would expect because a lot of those people, I think, they just put it on Instagram. But like Tanner Merkle, Gil Goodman, they all have Instagrams. Adam Glass is another big name in grip. He has an Instagram. I don't know that those guys do anything on YouTube anymore. So because of that, I try to do even more on YouTube because anymore, if you watch like a grip strength video, within like two videos, you'll be on one of my videos.
Yeah, I've been watching your videos lately.
Yeah, I try to be consistent with YouTube videos. It's just sometimes there's no time. It's not that there's no interest, on my part. It's just I just don't have the time all the time to do it. So, so that's been a limiting factor. But I have ads on my videos, so I make a little money, but I mean, it might pay my cable bill. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know.
My internet's paid for. So my internet and my cell phone's paid for. That's about it. So
actually, our friend Bedr, I think I noticed the other day, also has a YouTube channel. I need to subscribe to it.
Yes, he does have a YouTube channel.
I saw that he was, I think he had Larry Wheels doing some Gripsport stuff.
Yeah, and he found some other dude out there that's an absolute freak, dude. He's a manual labor guy. He lifted the Millennium dumbbell, which is a 230-pound inch dumbbell, basically.
Wow.
He lifted that.
You know what the sport might need is to get people like Larry Wheels to do videos doing Gripsport, or even there's this channel called Juji and Tom. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Oh yeah, they were at my gym. I'm on their channel. We did 2 videos in 2018.
Oh, great. That's what I was going to suggest. Actually, you guys already did it. Oh, great. Yeah, they like to popularize interesting sports.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jedd. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Sorry, I got distracted there by the phone. I really apologize. I hate when people do that to me, but I think someone's out to the front door right now.
Not at all. Not at all. I really wanted just to thank you for spending so much time with us. I really think I may have to hire you to help me get back into the sport to save some time. I know you have the best advice and experience.
Let's do it, man. I mean, let's do it. We could set something up that would be really beneficial to you, because there's no sense in trying to relearn everything, man. Exactly. I've been working with people for 7 years now, and we've really been able to cut through a lot of stuff. And just based on the goals, I kind of have like a greatest hits for the different goals. So, I mean, I think we could set up something that's really, really good for you.
I'll definitely be in contact soon.
Sounds great, buddy.
And I hope, people on my channel, I try to show interesting sports like arm wrestling and grip. Sometimes they get a little bit less views, but I'm sure the people who watch this will learn quite a bit about the sport and get interested in it, and hopefully help your counsel as well.
Absolutely, buddy. That sounds great. I appreciate it once again. I know that grip isn't a huge topic, but it's if you work on it and improve it just a little bit, it can have tremendous benefit in all your other training. No doubt.
I really think so, for MMA, for climbing, for everything else.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep. No
Please
doubt.
give my regards to Bedr when you speak to him next.
I will, buddy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jedd. We'll see you soon.